The lie was small enough to fit inside Leah's pocket, a fistful of wrinkled coins and a courage she didn't know she owned. 3 days. That was all she needed, a father who could stand in the PTA hall like a shield against whispers, a man in a sharp suit who could make the world stop laughing. When Leah collided with Jabari Alaid, the billionaire whose name opened doors and silenced rooms fate didn't knock, it burst in drenched by rain and humming like a warning drum. He thought it was a game. She thought it was survival. Neither of them knew that the thread between them had been tied years ago, long before money, before loneliness, before the word orphan burned her tongue. What begins as a rented role will rip open a past buried in silence and teach them both what family really costs and what it gives back. Before we begin, drop your location and local time in the comments, and if you're new here, subscribe to join our story circle. The bell rang like a drum of doom, echoing through the walls of St. Mary's Academy. The other children burst out of the classroom with shrieks of joy, their shoes squeaking across the tiled floor as they rushed for meat pies and soft drinks. But Leah stayed rooted to her desk, her small hands gripping the edges of her notebook until her knuckles turned white. Leah. The voice of Mrs. Camara, her class teacher, cut through the chaos like a final warning. The woman's arms were folded, her eyes both stern and heavy with worry. She had covered for Leah too many times and she was running out of excuses. You said your father is a businessman. You said he travels a lot, Mrs. Camara pressed. Well, tomorrow there's a PTA meeting. If no one shows up for you, the principal says you will be expelled. Do you understand? Leah swallowed hard, her throat as dry as chalk. She forced a tiny nod, but her chest was already trembling. Expelled. The word clung to her like a curse. She mumbled something about her father being busy, but the teacher turned away, shaking her head as though she could no longer bear the weight of another lie. The truth was crueler than anything the teacher could imagine. Leah had no father. She had no mother either. She lived with her Uncle Jonah, her late mother's younger brother, who swept floors and scrubbed toilets in one of the tallest glass towers in the city. When he had first taken her in, he bought her secondhand textbooks, stretched his salary so she could eat, even braided her hair on Sundays with clumsy fingers. But that was before he married Agnes. Agnes was the kind of woman who wore smiles like masks. To outsiders, she was polite, gentle, respectful. Behind closed doors, her words cut sharper than broken glass. She despised Leah, never failed to remind her that she was a burden, a shadow from a past that should have stayed dead. And now Agnes was pregnant. Every night, Leah lay on her mat in the narrow corridor, listening to the muffled arguments through the thin wall. You spend everything on her, Agnes hissed. What about our child? Are you going to waste our future on someone else's mistake? She's my niece, Jonah replied in a tired voice. I promised my sister I'd care for her. Then let the orphanage care for her. Or, are you planning to raise her forever? The words pierced Leah like knives. She pressed her hands against her ears, tears soaking her thin pillow. No matter how small she tried to make herself, she couldn't disappear. The next morning, her teacher handed her an envelope, formal, heavy sealed with the school's crest. Give this to your parent or guardian. Tomorrow is the last chance, Leah. She walked home with the envelope burning against her chest like it carried her whole life inside. By the time she reached the compound where she lived, her sandals were coated with dust, her uniform damp with sweat. She stood at the door for a long moment listening. Jonah's voice was low, almost pleading. Agnes's tone was sharp and mocking. Pushing the door open, Leah slipped in quietly. She wanted to hand him the letter to beg him again. But Jonah caught her eye and shook his head almost imperceptibly like a warning. Not now. She clenched her lips shut and retreated to the corridor, holding the envelope like a ticking bomb. That night she tried again. She waited until Agnes had fallen asleep, then tiptoed to Jonah's mat. Uncle, she whispered, it's important. The teacher says if you don't come, they'll send me away. Jonah rubbed his eyes, his face pale in the dim lantern light. I'm busy, Leah. I can't just walk into that school and embarrass myself. I have work. But Uncle, go back to bed. His voice was harsh, but his eyes were guilty. She obeyed, but inside something hardened. Tomorrow could not wait. The following afternoon, she left school with the envelope pressed against her palm and headed straight for the heart of the city. The building was impossible to miss, a skyscraper of glass and steel, the place Jonah worked as a cleaner. Leah's breath caught in her throat as she craned her neck upward. The sun reflected off the windows so brightly that she had to squint. At the gate stood security guards in black suits, eyes scanning, radios crackling. One of them frowned when he noticed the tiny girl standing there. Little one, where are your parents? I need to see my uncle, Leah said firmly, though her voice quivered. I have a letter from school. It's urgent. What's his name? Jonah Okoro. He works here as a cleaner. The guards exchanged doubtful glances. One finally called him on the intercom. Minutes later, Jonah appeared, his uniform damp with sweat. Instead of relief, his face was etched with anger. "Leah, what are you doing here?" he hissed. "Do you want to get me fired? Look at you standing here in those ragged shoes. Go home." Her lips trembled. "Uncle, it's the letter. The teacher says if you don't come—" I said, "Go home." His voice rose. "Do you want my boss to see me talking to you like this? Go beg someone else. I can't help you." He turned his back and walked inside. The guards looked away, embarrassed. Leah's fingers dug into the envelope until the paper bent. She forced her feet to move one step, then another, her vision blurred by unshed tears. She hadn't gone far when it happened. Bam! She collided with a solid chest, stumbled back, and landed hard on the pavement. The envelope flew from her hand. Above her stood a tall man in a tailored suit, his shoes gleaming, his presence commanding. His jawline looked carved, his eyes sharp as steel. "Are you not watching where you're going?" he snapped. Leah blinked up at him, pain shooting through her knees. Then with a stubborn spark, she shot back. "You should be the one watching. You hit a child." The man's brows furrowed. "What, you ran into me?" "You hurt me," she wailed suddenly, pressing her back dramatically. "My legs, they're broken." People nearby paused, curious. A few raised their phones. The man's frown deepened. This was not the kind of scene a billionaire CEO wanted trending online. "Driver," he barked. "Take her to the hospital now." Before Leah could blink, the stranger bent down and scooped her up. Gasps rippled through the crowd as he carried her across the pavement, his expensive cologne mingling with the dusty air. For a moment, Leah forgot the pain in her knees. She clutched his shoulder, eyes wide. He looked exactly like the father she had invented in her lies, powerful, untouchable, and oddly safe. Her heart whispered he would fit the role perfectly. Inside the black Mercedes, the man sat beside her, visibly annoyed, but also strangely unsettled. He glanced sideways at the small girl with the big eyes who kept staring at him. "Why are you looking at me like that?" he muttered. Leah's lips curled into the faintest smile. "Because you look like someone who could be my dad." The words startled him more than her little act of fainting. He looked away, but something stirred in his chest, something he hadn't felt in years. And so what began as an accident, a bump on the pavement, was about to change both their lives forever. The hospital smelled like antiseptic and freshly polished tiles. Bright lights reflected on the white walls as Jabari Alaid, the CEO who commanded boardrooms and crushed competition, with a single look carried the small girl into the emergency wing. The receptionist nearly fell out of her chair when she saw him storm in with a child in his arms. "Doctor, emergency," he barked, his voice echoing. Nurses rushed forward, their shoes squeaking against the floor, but Leah didn't struggle. She lay against his chest, her eyes wide as she drank in the luxury of the polished lobby and the chilled air conditioning. For a moment, she imagined she was a princess being carried into a palace. Minutes later, Dr. Obina, a short man with rimmed glasses, appeared. "Mr. Alaid, what happened?" She fell. "Check her legs, her back, everything," Jabari ordered, setting Leah gently on the examination bed. His usual impatience burned in his eyes, but beneath it something softer flickered. Dr. Obina examined quickly, knees, spine, reflexes. After a few minutes, he adjusted his glasses and cleared his throat. "She's perfectly fine. No fractures, no bruises. The only thing she's suffering from is hunger." Leah sat up, her grin mischievous. "See, I told you I'm fragile, not broken." Jabari's jaw tightened, caught between irritation and amusement. "You made me waste my time for this." "No," Leah replied boldly, swinging her legs off the bed. "I made you notice me." The nurse stifled a laugh. Jabari glared until the woman quickly excused herself. He turned back to Leah, who was now eyeing the tray. A hospital orderly had brought in jollof rice, fried chicken, a small carton of juice. Her eyes lit up as if she had just discovered buried treasure. "Is that for me?" she asked, her voice trembling with excitement. "Yes," Jabari said flatly. She attacked the plate with both hands, spoon in one, chicken leg in the other. Jabari watched a strange feeling stirring in his chest. She ate like she hadn't tasted food in days. Maybe she hadn't. "Slow down or you'll choke," he muttered. She paused just long enough to grin at him with her mouth full. "We don't get choke, we only get hungry." For the first time in months, Jabari laughed. A deep, genuine laugh that surprised even himself. He hadn't laughed like that since before. The sound echoed through the sterile room, making Leah's grin stretch even wider. After polishing off the meal, she leaned back, sipping her juice slowly like a queen who had just been served at a banquet. Then she set the carton down, her eyes serious. Sir, I need to ask you something important. Jabari raised a brow. What now? She clasped her small hands together. Can you pretend to be my dad? Just for 3 days. The words hung in the air, heavy but innocent. Jabari blinked. Excuse me. Yes, she said firmly, her tiny voice full of boldness. Pretend to be my dad, just 3 days. There's a PTA meeting tomorrow. If no adult shows up, they'll throw me out of school. Please. Jabari stared at her as if trying to figure out whether she was serious. Her eyes didn't waver. And why would I do that? He asked finally. I'll pay you. He almost choked on air. Pay me? With what? From her tattered school bag, Leah pulled out a crumpled wad of Naira notes. She counted carefully, smoothed the edges, then held it out to him with both hands. 1,500. All I have. I earned it helping classmates with homework. Jabari stared at the pitiful amount, then at her determined little face. The absurdity of it broke him into another laugh, louder, this time echoing through the room until the nurse peeked in again. You're insane, he said, shaking his head. No, Leah replied stubbornly. I'm serious. 3 days. That's all I need. You look exactly like the father I told everyone I had. For a moment, Jabari froze. Something about her words pierced him. A father she told everyone she had. He leaned forward. Why lie about your dad? Leah's eyes dropped to the floor. She twisted her fingers, her voice barely a whisper. Because it hurts when people laugh. One girl called me an orphan, a beggar. They say I don't belong. So I invented a dad who's rich and busy. I thought it would protect me. But now, the teacher says if no one shows up tomorrow, I'll be expelled. Silence filled the room. Jabari stared at her, and for the first time in years, the mighty CEO didn't have words. Finally, Leah placed the crumpled notes on the table. Please, sir, just 3 days. After that, you never have to see me again. Jabari stood, running a hand through his neatly cut hair. He should walk away. He had no time for this nonsense. He had meetings, contracts, investors waiting. But something in the way her eyes glistened, in the way she sat upright like a warrior defending her last shred of dignity, it struck him. You're lucky I'm in a good mood today, he muttered. Her face lit up instantly. So it's a yes, he sighed. Fine. 3 days. But only because I don't want to see you expelled. She clapped her hands once, a delighted sound that filled the sterile hospital room with warmth. Thank you, sir. Tomorrow, 8 a.m. school gate. Don't be late, Daddy. The word daddy rolled off her tongue so naturally that Jabari's chest tightened. He said nothing, only turned away with a shake of his head. But as he left the hospital, a strange smile tugged at his lips, one he couldn't quite suppress. That night in his penthouse, he couldn't sleep. He stood in front of the mirror trying different ties, wondering why it mattered. His mother, Madame Ya, raised a brow when she saw him fussing. Since when did you care so much about ties, she teased. It's nothing, Mama, he muttered, hiding the odd flutter in his chest. But deep inside, he knew it wasn't nothing. Tomorrow, for reasons he couldn't explain, mattered more than any board meeting he had ever attended. Across town in the cramped corridor of Jonah's house, Leah lay on her mat, clutching the envelope tightly. For the first time in weeks, hope glimmered faintly in her heart. Maybe tomorrow she wouldn't be the orphan everyone mocked. Maybe, just maybe, she would stand tall with a father by her side, even if it was only pretend. And as the city lights flickered outside, 2 lives, one broken by loneliness, the other hardened by power, were about to collide in ways neither could ever have imagined. The sun rose lazily over the city, painting the glass towers with streaks of gold. Birds chattered on electric wires, and the streets of Lagos buzzed awake with honking buses and impatient okadas. But in a quiet penthouse, Jabari Alaid stood in front of his mirror, tying and retying his tie for the 5th time. He scowled at his reflection. This is ridiculous, he muttered, tugging at the knot. He was Jabari Alaid, CEO of Alaid Group, a man who sealed billion-dollar contracts without blinking. Why should he be nervous about meeting a child at a school gate? Yet his palms felt damp, and his heart raced in a way board meetings never managed. From the doorway, Madame Ya, his mother, leaned against the frame, sipping tea. Her eyes twinkled with amusement. Since when does my son change ties like a bride changing gowns? Is there a woman involved? Jabari shot her a look. It's not what you think, Mama. I just want to look presentable. For who, she teased. The president, he didn't answer. How could he explain that a little girl with big eyes and ragged shoes had unsettled him more than any investor? By 7:45 a.m., his black SUV was parked across from Street Mary's Academy. The engine purred softly, but Jabari couldn't sit still. He checked his watch, adjusted his cuffs, combed invisible hairs from his head. Each second felt longer than a boardroom negotiation. Then, like a burst of light, he saw her. Leah came skipping down the street in her faded school uniform, her hair tied in two rough puffs. Her shoes were dusty, her socks mismatched. Yet the moment she spotted the sleek SUV, her face lit up with unrestrained joy. "Daddy," she shouted, her voice ringing clear. Before he could react, she ran straight into his arms. He caught her, instinctively stunned by the boldness of her hug. Children weren't supposed to trust strangers so easily. But Leah clung to him as though she'd known him all her life. "Hello, my princess," he said awkwardly, the words slipping out before he could stop it. She leaned close, whispering mischievously, "You're such a good actor." He almost laughed out loud. But then he noticed her hair messy, tangled, and her shoes barely holding together. He frowned. "We need to fix this." "But we'll be late," she protested. "Let them wait," Jabari said firmly. "They'll wait for my daughter." Before she could argue, he guided her back into the SUV. The driver pulled away, and soon they stopped at one of the finest children's salons in Lekki. The receptionist's eyes widened when Jabari walked in with a little girl. "Good morning, sir. Welcome, sir," she stammered. Her hair, Jabari said simply. "Make it neat and pretty, quickly." Leah sank into the pink salon chair like royalty, kicking her legs playfully. She glanced at him through the mirror, her eyes gleaming. "Is this your company too?" He chuckled. "No, this one belongs to my mother." "Oh." She nodded as if everything made perfect sense. While the stylist worked, Jabari sat in the corner, pretending to scroll through his phone but stealing glances at her. Something about the way she grinned at her reflection, unbothered by the expensive surroundings, stirred an ache deep in his chest. Halfway through, his driver entered with a shoebox. When Leah's hair was done neatly braided with colorful clips, Jabari presented the box. "Here," he said, opening it. Leah gasped. "New shoes. For me." "Yes," he replied. "Try them on." She slipped them on her eyes, sparkling as she stood before the mirror. Her reflection had transformed neat braids, polished shoes, glowing face. She looked like a girl stepping into the life she always dreamed of. "Thank you, Daddy," she whispered, half in jest, half in awe. Jabari cleared his throat. "Let's go. We're late." When they walked into the PTA hall, every head turned. Parents stopped mid-sentence, teachers blinked, and even the guest speaker faltered. Jabari, in his tailored black suit, exuded power and grace. Leah, holding his hand, walked with a confidence that made her classmates gape. "Is that a senator?" someone whispered. "Or a foreign ambassador?" another guessed. Ruby, the girl who had mocked Leah, nearly swallowed her tongue. Her mouth fell open so wide a meat pie could have fit inside. Mrs. Kamara adjusted her glasses, stunned. She had expected a weary uncle in worn trousers, not a man who looked like he belonged on the cover of Forbes. Jabari guided Leah to a seat in the front row. He leaned down and whispered, "You owe me big time for this." She grinned back. "Best deal I ever made." When the meeting ended while other parents complained about fees, Jabari walked straight to the principal's office. Without flinching, he wrote a check, covering all of Leah's tuition, until graduation fees, books, uniforms, even a donation to renovate the library. As they stepped outside, Leah clutched the receipt like a golden ticket. "Did you see Ruby's face?" she whispered gleefully. Flies almost had a party in her mouth. Jabari laughed so hard he had to hold his side. Even his driver glanced back surprised. His boss, the man famous for firing an intern because of sloppy handwriting, was laughing like a boy. On the drive home, Leah leaned against the window, humming softly. When they reached her street, she jumped out, turned back, and waved. "Bye, Daddy. See you tomorrow." Jabari waved back his lips, curving in a smile that refused to leave. As she disappeared into the compound, he sat still for a long moment. Something inside him shifted, like a locked door creaking open. Back at the office, his staff exchanged curious looks. Their boss, the usually stone-faced CEO, entered with a smile stretching from ear to ear. One intern whispered, "Olga has fallen in love." With who, another asked. Nobody knew. And Jabari wasn't ready to explain that the new joy in his life came in the form of a little girl with braids, new shoes, and the boldest mouth he had ever encountered. That evening, he found himself humming as he loosened his tie. His mother watched him closely. "You're glowing," she said. "Who is she?" He chuckled. "Her name is Leah. She hired me today." "Hired you, madam?" Ya frowned. "Yes. To be her fake daddy. She paid me 1,500 naira. His mother blinked, then burst into laughter. "My son, the billionaire, working for 1,500 naira. Wonders shall never end." But Jabari only smiled as he poured himself a glass of water. For the first time in years, he was looking forward to tomorrow. The next morning dawned brighter than usual, as though even the sun wanted to witness what was about to unfold. Jabari woke before his alarm, a habit he never had. Normally he slept until his phone buzzed with urgent boardroom calls. But today he stood before his wardrobe, staring at rows of suits like a man preparing for a coronation. He chose a charcoal gray suit, crisp white shirt, and a tie so perfectly knotted it could have been drawn with a ruler. His driver raised a brow when Jabari slid into the back seat at 7:15 a.m., 45 minutes earlier than usual. "Oga, today you look like you're going to a wedding," the driver teased. "Shut up and drive," Jabari replied, though a faint smile tugged at his lips. At exactly 7:58 a.m., the black SUV purred to a stop in front of Street Mary's Academy. Children streamed through the gates, chattering and laughing. Then, like a ray of stubborn sunlight, Leah appeared. She wore her uniform, the hem slightly frayed, but her posture radiated a confidence new to her. Her mismatched socks peeked out beneath polished shoes, the very shoes Jabari had bought the day before. Her hair, neatly braided with colorful clips, shone in the morning light. When she spotted him, she didn't hesitate. "Daddy," she shouted, her voice ringing across the yard. Several parents turned curious while students froze mid-step. Leah dashed to the car, yanked open the door, and jumped straight into his arms. "Good morning, my princess," Jabari said, still awkward but trying. "You're really good at this acting thing," she whispered with a grin. Jabari chuckled softly, shaking his head. He guided her back into the SUV. "We're making a quick stop." "Where?" "You'll see." They pulled up to a children's boutique salon. The receptionist nearly fainted when Jabari walked in holding Leah's hand. "Good morning, sir," she stammered. "Her hair," Jabari said. "Make it quick, something neat and beautiful." Leah sank into the pink salon chair like a princess born to be adored. She giggled as the stylist worked, occasionally peeking at her reflection. "Do I look like the daughter of a billionaire now?" she asked. Jabari glanced at her through the mirror. "You look like someone the world should never underestimate." Meanwhile, his driver slipped in quietly with a glossy shoebox. When the braids were done, Jabari opened the box to reveal sparkling black shoes. Leah's jaw dropped. "For me," she gasped. "Yes," Jabari said simply. "Try them." She slipped them on, twirling before the mirror. Her eyes sparkled. For the first time in her life, she looked like a girl who belonged somewhere important. "Thank you, Daddy," she whispered. The words made his chest tighten strangely, but he said nothing. By the time they arrived at the PTA meeting, whispers had already spread like wildfire. Parents turned their heads, teachers froze, and the hall fell into stunned silence. Jabari walked with Leah at his side, his tall figure radiating power, her small hand clasping his. Together, they looked like royalty. "Who is that?" one parent whispered. "Must be a senator." "No, a foreign ambassador maybe." Ruby, the classmate who had mocked Leah, nearly choked on her own gasp. Her jaw dropped so wide it seemed it would never close. Mrs. Kamara, Leah's teacher, blinked several times, adjusting her glasses in disbelief. She had expected a weary uncle, not a man who looked like he belonged on the cover of a magazine. Jabari sat confidently in the front row, his arm draped casually behind Leah's chair. He leaned down and whispered, "You owe me big for this." She whispered back, her grin mischievous. "Best lie I ever told." The principal cleared his throat nervously before continuing the meeting, but everyone's eyes kept flicking toward Jabari, wondering who he was, what he was doing there. Leah sat tall, her back straight, her chin lifted. For the first time, she didn't feel invisible. After the meeting, while other parents worried about school fees, Jabari rose and walked straight to the principal's office. The staff scrambled to their feet as he entered. Without hesitation, he pulled out his checkbook and signed away. "All her fees until graduation," he said coolly. "Books, uniforms, extras, and add a donation for the library renovation." The principal nearly fainted. Thank you, sir. This is most generous." When they left the office, Leah clutched the receipt to her chest like it was a treasure map. Her face shone with triumph. "Did you see Ruby's face? Flies almost had a party in her mouth." Jabari burst into laughter, clutching his side. Even his driver was stunned. This was the same man who rarely smiled now, laughing freely like a boy. On the ride home, Leah hummed happily, her voice filling the car. She clutched her new shoes occasionally, glancing at Jabari as though trying to memorize his face. When they reached her compound, she hopped out, waved dramatically, and called, "Bye, Daddy, see you tomorrow." Jabari waved back his smile, refusing to fade. He sat in the car long after she disappeared inside his chest, heavy with a feeling he couldn't name. At the office, whispers followed him. His usually cold demeanor was gone, replaced with an energy no one recognized. One intern whispered to another, "Olga has fallen in love." But with who, the other asked. No one knew. And Jabari wasn't about to explain that the one stirring his heart wasn't a woman but a little girl with braids, new shoes, and a laugh that had cracked open his stone-cold soul. That evening, he returned home humming. Madame Ya watched him with sharp eyes. "You're smiling," she noted. "What's her name?" He chuckled. "Her name is Leah. She hired me today." "Hired you?" "Yes. To be her fake father. She paid me 1,500 naira. His mother blinked, then burst into laughter. "My son, the billionaire, hired for pocket money. Wonders will never end." But Jabari only smiled, loosening his tie. For the first time in years, tomorrow didn't feel like another day of work. It felt like the start of something more. And somewhere across the city, Leah lay on her mat, hugging her new shoes and whispering to herself, "Tomorrow, Daddy will come again." For the first time in her life, sleep came easily, carrying her into dreams where she wasn't an orphan, wasn't mocked, wasn't alone. She had a father, even if it was just for 3 days. The second day came with a light drizzle that left the city smelling of wet earth and exhaust fumes. Street, Mary's Academy buzzed with chatter about the mystery father who had walked into the PTA meeting with Leah the day before. Children whispered in corners, teachers exchanged curious looks, and even the school guards craned their necks at every black SUV that passed, hoping to catch another glimpse of the man. By 7:50 a.m., Jabari's SUV pulled up once again. He stepped out immaculately, dressed in a navy blue suit, holding an umbrella like it was a sword against the rain. Leah spotted him from the corner of the street, her uniform damp at the edges, her braids bouncing as she ran. "Daddy!" she cried, running straight into his arms. He bent slightly, sheltering her under the umbrella. "My princess, you're going to get soaked. Didn't you wait for me?" She shook her head with a cheeky grin. "I wanted everyone to see you come for me again." Jabari chuckled, shaking his head. "You're shameless." Together they walked into the school compound. Students froze mid-step, whispering furiously. Ruby, the girl who had tormented Leah for months, clenched her teeth until her face turned red. Leah glanced at her and lifted her chin proudly. For once, she didn't feel small. When classes ended, Jabari was waiting at the gate. Leah's eyes lit up and she hopped into the front seat like she belonged there. "So where are we going today, Daddy?" she asked with mischievous anticipation. He smirked. "You'll see." They drove to a small ice cream parlor tucked between a bookstore and a tailor's shop. The pastel-colored walls glowed under the dim afternoon light, and ceiling fans spun lazily overhead. Leah's jaw dropped as waiters brought out fancy glass cups with scoops of strawberry and vanilla ice cream topped with biscuits. "You mean, this is real?" she gasped. "Ice cream with biscuit on top." Jabari arched an eyebrow. "You've never had this before." "Not with biscuit," she exclaimed, digging in greedily. "This is like eating happiness." Her joy was so unfiltered that Jabari found himself laughing again, the sound startling him as much as it warmed him. Watching her eat messy but ecstatic reminded him of a time long gone, when his own childhood had been simpler before ambition had hardened him. Afterward, he wiped a smear of strawberry from her cheek with a napkin. She looked up at him with wide, unblinking eyes. "You'd make a really good real dad, you know." The words stabbed straight into his chest. He forced a smile. "Well, I'm only rented for 3 days, remember?" She frowned but said nothing. The car ride back to her neighborhood was unusually quiet. At her junction, she hesitated before stepping out. "Thank you, Daddy. See you tomorrow." Her voice was soft, almost trembling. When she disappeared into the compound, Jabari sat back in his seat, a strange heaviness settling in his chest. That evening at the Alade mansion, Madame Ya sat in her armchair embroidering as she always did, but her sharp eyes never missed anything. She studied her son as he paced the living room, humming under his breath. "Something's different," she declared suddenly. Jabari stopped. "What do you mean?" "You laugh more. You hum like a boy. And when you come home, you don't look tired, you look alive." He shrugged, but the corners of his mouth betrayed him. "Tell me." She pressed, setting aside her embroidery. "Who is she?" He hesitated. "Her name is Leah. A little girl." "A little girl," Ya frowned. "Jabari, don't tell me you've gone and—" "No," he cut in quickly. "It's not like that. She asked me to pretend to be her father for 3 days. She paid me pocket money for it." Ya blinked, then burst out laughing. "My son, the billionaire, hired as a father for 1,500 naira, if the newspapers hear this." But when she looked closer at his face, her laughter softened. "You care for her, don't you?" He looked away. "I don't know. She's different. She makes me laugh, and when she calls me daddy, his voice trailed off thick, with something he wasn't ready to name. Madame Ya leaned back, her eyes narrowing as though she were connecting invisible dots. Describe her. He did her braids, her wide eyes, the way she argued with boldness, far bigger than her size. As he spoke, Ya's lips tightened. She rose suddenly and fetched an old photo album. Look, she said, flipping to a picture of Jabari at 7. He glanced at it, then froze. The resemblance was uncanny, same wide eyes, same ears, even the mischievous grin. She looks like you, Ya whispered. Jabari, that child might be more than you think. He swallowed hard, staring at the photo, but shook his head. It's a coincidence. Or it's destiny, she said firmly. You'd better find out. That night, as Jabari lay in bed, Leah's words echoed in his mind. You'd make a really good real dad. He turned on his side, restless. For the first time in years, the billionaire who thought he had everything realized he might be missing the one thing that mattered most. Across town, Leah lay on her mat, listening to the muffled voices of Jonah and Agnes arguing. She clutched her new shoes to her chest, her heart aching with confusion. She wanted to believe the dream would last forever, that Jabari would always show up at the gate for her. But the shadows of her uncle's words, "You're a burden, you don't belong here," hung over her like storm clouds. Still, as sleep finally claimed her, she whispered to herself, "At least for 3 days I have a daddy." And somewhere in another part of the city, Jabari whispered into the darkness, "Why does this feel like it's more than just 3 days?" Both of them, in their separate worlds, didn't yet realize fate had tied a knot. Neither could untangle, and the real story was only just beginning. The third morning arrived with an unsettling stillness, the kind of quiet that feels like the pause before thunder. Leah dressed slowly, her heart heavy, though she couldn't explain why. She brushed her braids with care, slipped on her polished shoes, and clutched her school bag to her chest. This was the last day of the contract. 3 days, that was all she had asked for, and now it was almost over. At exactly 8 a.m., Jabari's SUV rolled up in front of the school. The sight of it made her heart leap, but this time she didn't shout "Daddy" with her usual boldness. Instead, she walked briskly, opened the door, and slipped inside with a quiet smile. "Good morning, Princess," Jabari said, noticing her silence. "Good morning," she whispered back, fiddling with her skirt hem. He studied her for a moment. She looked smaller somehow, her eyes less fiery. "What's wrong?" "Nothing," she replied quickly, but her voice carried a sadness she couldn't hide. Jabari didn't press. He simply reached over and patted her head gently. The gesture made her throat tighten. School ended earlier than usual that day. Leah walked out to find Jabari waiting as promised. The other children watched in awe. Ruby, whose ridicule had once made Leah cry, stood frozen, too shocked to even hiss. Leah didn't gloat. She just slipped into the SUV, her face quiet, her thoughts elsewhere. Instead of driving her home immediately, Jabari took her to a small bookshop cafe near the city center. They sat in a corner booth. Leah sipped hot cocoa while flipping through a book of fairy tales. Jabari watched her silently, the way her eyes lit up at each page, the way she muttered parts of the story under her breath, as though she were living inside it. "Do you like stories?" he asked. She nodded. "They make me forget." "Forget what?" She shrugged, avoiding his eyes. "That I don't really have parents." The words landed like a punch in his chest. He looked away, unable to answer. After cocoa, he drove her home. At her junction, she lingered in the seat, her tiny hands clutching the handle of her bag. Then she turned to him. "Thank you," she said softly. "I wish I had a real dad like you." For a long moment, Jabari's throat tightened. Words hovered, but none came out. Finally, he forced a light tone. "It was nice doing business with you." She smiled faintly, nodded, and stepped out. This time, she didn't run, didn't wave. She just walked slowly toward the compound, her shoulders hunched. Jabari sat watching until she disappeared. The silence inside the car was deafening. That evening, in Jonah's home, tension crackled like dry firewood. Leah walked in to find her uncle sitting stiffly, a packed bag by the wall. Agnes stood with her arms folded, her face triumphant. "Leah," Jonah said, not meeting her eyes, "we're moving." Her heart skipped. "All of us?" "No, just me and your aunt. You'll stay in an orphanage here." The words sliced her open. "Why?" she whispered. Agnes scoffed. "Because you're a burden. We can't carry you like baggage forever." Jonah winced, but didn't argue. "It's not like that. I got a job in Kaduna. Things are finally turning around. I just need time to settle. When I can, I'll come for you." Tears welled in Leah's eyes. "But I've been good. I've tried." "I know," Jonah whispered, his voice breaking. "Just be strong a little longer." But Agnes rolled her eyes. Enough drama, pack your things. Days later, Leah returned from school to find the house empty. No chairs, no curtains, no voices, just 2 polythene bags in the corner. A neighbor peeked over the fence. Your uncle left this morning. Said your bags are there. Leah sat on the floor numb. Hours later, strangers arrived, the new tenants. She realized the truth then. She had been abandoned. The orphanage was nothing like the ones in fairy tales. No cheerful songs, no colorful dorms. Just a crumbling building with peeling paint, crowded bunks, and a matron whose cane was quicker than her smile. Meals were meager thin pap in the morning, watery beans at night. Leah scrubbed floors until her fingers ached, fetched buckets heavier than her small frame, and endured taunts from older children. Nights were the hardest. The bed springs creaked with every movement. The room smelled of damp clothes, and tears burned her eyes until sleep claimed her. She missed her uncle, despite his weakness. She missed her tiny mat at home. Most of all, she missed Jabari. One night, unable to bear it anymore, she whispered into the darkness, "I need him." And so when the opportunity came, when the night watchman dozed off by the gate, she slipped out quietly with her small bag. Her sandals slapped against the pavement as she walked through sleeping streets, guided only by stubborn hope. By dawn, her legs ached, but she kept going. At 8 a.m., she reached the towering glass building Jabari's company. The same security guards eyed her suspiciously. "You again, go home, child. This is no place for you." "Please," she begged. "Tell him Leah is here. He knows me." They shook their heads. "Stop troubling us." Rejected, she shuffled to a corner of the pavement and sat down. Hours passed. The sun rose high, baking the streets. Hunger clawed at her stomach, thirst burned her throat. Still, she didn't move. When evening came, the sky darkened and rain began to fall, heavy, merciless. Passersby hurried with umbrellas, stepping around the little girl huddled against the wall. Leah sat drenched, her small bag beside her, her teeth chattering. She whispered one word over and over, "Daddy, Daddy." At 7 p.m., the company doors swung open. Jabari stepped out, phone pressed to his ear, his tones sharp as he discussed a board meeting. Then he saw her. His words froze in his throat. The phone slipped from his hand. Leah. She looked up, her lips, trembling eyes glassy with tears. "Daddy," she whimpered, collapsing against herself. Without hesitation, Jabari sprinted across the pavement. He scooped her into his arms, her soaked body limp against him. His heart thundered as though the world had just tilted. "What are you doing here? Why are you in the rain?" His voice cracked, panic surging. "My uncle left me," she sobbed weakly. "The orphanage, it's bad. Please, don't let them take me back." Jabari's throat closed. He pulled off his coat and wrapped it tightly around her shivering frame. "You're not going back there," he whispered fiercely. "You're coming home with me." The rain pounded harder, lightning split the sky, but Jabari didn't care. He carried her toward his SUV, shielding her like she was made of glass. His driver rushed to open the door. "Pick up her bag," Jabari commanded. "Yes, sir." As the car door closed, silence filled the cabin, except for the sound of Leah's ragged breaths. Jabari pressed her close, his hand rubbing her back. "You're safe now," he murmured. "I've got you, I promise." And this time it wasn't business, it wasn't a game, it wasn't pretend. It was real. The mansion gate swung open as the SUV rolled inside, its tires splashing puddles from the storm. The rain drummed heavily on the roof, thunder crackled in the distance, but inside the car there was only the sound of Leah's shallow breathing and Jabari's pounding heart. "Quick," he barked as the driver pulled up near the entrance. Before the car had fully stopped, Jabari threw open the door and carried Leah in his arms, her tiny fingers clutching his shirt like she was terrified he might vanish. Her soaked bag dangled from the driver's hand as they hurried in. Inside, the warm light of chandeliers glowed against polished marble floors. Madame Ya was in the living room, sipping malt, her eyes glued to an old Yoruba drama. The moment she saw Jabari, soaked, breathless, cradling a frail little girl, she leapt to her feet. "Blood of Jesus," she cried. "Jabari, who is this child?" "Mom, meet Leah," he said quickly, his voice tight with urgency. "She was outside my office in the rain. Her uncle abandoned her. Please help me, she's freezing." Madame Ya didn't hesitate. "Take her upstairs, the blue room. Now." Servants scattered. Warm towels, pajamas, and hot cocoa were fetched within minutes. Jabari stood helpless at the doorway as his mother gently peeled off Leah's wet clothes, wrapped her in towels, and rubbed her down until her shivering eased. "You're safe now, darling," Ya whispered, as she helped Leah sip the steaming cocoa. "This house is your home." Leah blinked through half-closed eyes and whispered, "Best cocoa I ever had." Then she drifted into sleep. Jabari sat at the edge of the bed long after the others left, his clothes still damp. He brushed a strand of hair from her forehead, his chest heavy. Something about watching her sleep made him feel like he had been entrusted with the most fragile treasure in the world. The following morning, Leah woke to sunlight streaming through delicate curtains. Her first sight was not Jabari, but Madame Ya, seated beside her with a soft smile. "Good morning, my dear. You can call me Grandma if you like." Grandma Leah hecho it. "Yes, Ya said firmly. "You're part of this family now." Leah blinked, then smiled shyly. "I like you already." From that moment, the bond between them grew fast. Ya showed her how to pick the ripest tomatoes in the market, taught her traditional proverbs, even shared embarrassing stories of Jabari as a boy. In the evenings, they sat together on the couch watching movies. Ya massaged her tiny feet while teasing, "No boys until you are 50-0. Leah would giggle, "No boys, Grandma." And for the first time, Jabari's mansion didn't feel like a museum, it felt like a home. But the world outside wasn't blind. Rumors began to swirl. Photos of Jabari carrying a soaked little girl into his SUV had leaked online. Blogs screamed headlines, "Billionaire CEO has secret daughter who is the child living in Jabari Alaid's mansion." The board of Alaid Group demanded explanations. "Is she your illegitimate child? Do you realize what this does to our brand?" one director snapped during a tense meeting. At the same time, Vanessa, a PR executive who had once pursued Jabari romantically, saw opportunity. She approached him with a smirk. "I can fix this, Jabari, but only if you let me control the story. Sign me as exclusive partner, and maybe if you're smart more than a partner." He stared at her coldly. "Stay out of my family's life." Her smile sharpened. "Family, so she is your daughter." He walked out before rage made him do something reckless. The real storm, however, came from the past. One evening, as Leah was helping Ya arrange old albums, a folded envelope slipped from between the pages. It was worn yellowed, but Leah recognized the name written in neat cursive: Naima, her mother. Curious, she handed it to Ya. Together they opened it. The letter was short, almost rushed. "If anything happens to me, promise me Leah will not be left alone. She deserves to know her father one day. His name, Jabari." Ya's hands shook as she read. She looked up at Leah, her eyes wide. "My child, your mother wrote this." Leah's own heart thudded painfully. "You mean Mr. Jabari could be my real dad?" When Jabari walked in later, he found both of them pale and silent, the letter spread across the table. He froze his eyes, locking onto the name that had haunted him for years. Naima, the only woman he had ever truly loved. The woman who had vanished without goodbye. "That's impossible," he muttered, though his chest told him otherwise. But the resemblance, the timing, the letter, it was too much to ignore. That night, unable to sleep, Jabari did something he had never done before. He tiptoed into Leah's room, gently took her toothbrush, and sent it for DNA testing. His hands trembled as he sealed the sample. While waiting for results, life in the mansion was both sweet and tense. Leah adjusted quickly, filling the house with laughter. She painted pictures for Jabari, asked endless questions about his company, and once even sat in his office chair, pretending to fire invisible employees. "You're fired, and you." "No free lunch," she declared, making Jabari laugh until his ribs hurt. But the whispers outside grew louder. Vanessa leaked more stories. Jonah and Agnes suddenly reappeared, demanding money. "She's our responsibility," Jonah insisted, eyes greedy. "Pay us and we'll take her back." Jabari nearly threw him out of the mansion. "You abandoned her. You have no right." Agnes sneered. "So you admit she's yours?" "Leave," Jabari thundered. 3 weeks later, the DNA results arrived. Jabari opened the envelope with shaking hands. His eyes blurred as he read the words, "Paternity match 99.99%. He sank into his chair, tears spilling freely for the first time in decades. "She's mine," he whispered hoarsely. "She's my daughter." Ya, standing behind him, clapped her hands. "Didn't I tell you? My 9 eyes never lie." Jabari pressed the paper to his chest, overwhelmed by both joy and regret. He thought of Naima, the love he had lost, the promise he had never known he'd broken. But most of all, he thought of Leah, the little girl who had barged into his life with crumpled notes and fearless eyes. That evening, he walked into her room quietly. She was lying on her pink bed legs, dangling, humming a tune as she sketched with crayons. She looked up, beaming. "Daddy, you're back." Jabari sat beside her, his voice trembling. "Princess, I have something important to tell you." She tilted her head. What is it? He swallowed. I did a test, and I found out something. I'm not just your rented daddy. I'm your real father. Leah blinked, her crayon dropping. Real father. Yes, he whispered, tears pooling. Your mommy, Naima, and I, we loved each other once. You are my child, my blood, my daughter. For a long moment, silence hung in the room. Then Leah smiled, a smile so bright it cracked the last of Jabari's defenses. She launched into his arms, clutching his neck. I knew it, she whispered. I told Grandma you look like me. Jabari laughed through tears, holding her tightly. I love you, my princess. I promise I will never let you go again. And for the first time in years, the mighty billionaire felt whole. The revelation settled into Jabari's heart like a storm that had finally broken. For nights he had carried the weight of uncertainty, haunted by the name Naima, the woman who had vanished from his life without a trace. And now here was Leah, his daughter, flesh of his flesh, a living reminder of a love cut short. That night, after Leah fell asleep, curled up in his arms, Jabari sat alone in his study. Papers were scattered across the mahogany desk, but he couldn't read a single line. He stared instead at the DNA results, tears staining the edges of the paper. A part of him felt robbed of years he should have spent watching her grow, robbed of the chance to stand by Naima before her death. But another part of him whispered gratitude. Fate had delivered Leah back into his life against all odds. The next morning, Jabari made a decision. He wasn't just going to protect Leah, he was going to fight for her. The first battle came sooner than expected. Jonah returned with Agnes, brazen as ever. They stormed into the mansion, demanding to see Leah. She belongs to us, Jonah declared, his eyes darting at the gold-framed paintings and marble floors. We raised her when you weren't there. Pay us and we'll hand over guardianship. Leah, overhearing from the staircase, froze. Her small hands clutched the railing, her chest rising and falling quickly. Jabari's voice thundered across the hall. You abandoned her. You left her in an orphanage to rot. And now you dare come here with your dirty hands stretched out. Agnes smirked. So you admit she's yours, all the better. If you want her, buy her freedom. Jabari's jaw tightened. He took one deliberate step forward until he stood nose to nose with Jonah. Listen carefully. That girl is not for sale. She is my daughter, my blood. And if you ever step foot here again, I'll make sure you regret it. Jonah flinched under the weight of Jabari's glare. Agnes tugged his sleeve nervously. Let's go, she muttered. They retreated, but their words left a trail of unease. That evening, Jabari sat with Leah in the living room. She was unusually quiet, fiddling with her crayons. What's wrong, princess? He asked gently. Her voice wavered. Are they going to take me away again? Jabari's heart clenched. He pulled her onto his lap and kissed her forehead. Never. I promise you no one will ever take you from me again. You are mine, forever. Her eyes shimmered and she hugged him tightly. For the first time he realized the depth of her fear of abandonment, fear of being unwanted. He silently vowed she would never feel that way again. Days later, Jabari took Leah and Madame Ya to the cemetery where Naima rested. The air was heavy with the scent of lilies. Leah clutched a bouquet of fresh flowers, her tiny fingers trembling. They stood before the grave. Jabari's voice broke as he whispered, Naima, you should have told me. You should have let me know. But thank you for giving me the most precious gift. Leah knelt, placing the flowers gently on the soil. Hi, Mommy, she whispered. Guess what Daddy found me? He said he'll never let me go. I'm safe now. Tears streamed down Jabari's face as he pulled his daughter close. Madame Ya too wiped her eyes discreetly. The grave seemed to shimmer with peace, as though Naima herself had given her blessing. But the outside world wasn't finished testing them. Rumors swirled, tabloids printed scandalous headlines, and Vanessa, the ambitious PR executive, fueled the fire. The board won't trust you, Jabari, she sneered during a heated confrontation. Adopting a child like this, claiming she's your blood, investors hate drama. Step down or the company will collapse. Jabari's answer was steady, unwavering. If my company cannot survive me being a father, then it is not a company worth leading. His declaration shook the board. Slowly, one by one, they fell silent. For the first time, Jabari wasn't negotiating profit margins. He was negotiating love, identity, and legacy. At home, Leah thrived. With Ya as her grandmother and Jabari as her father, she blossomed like a flower, finally given sunlight. She devoured books, asked endless questions about the world, and even tried to mimic Jabari's business calls, pretending to hire and fire imaginary staff. One evening, Jabari found her curled up on the couch with Ya, watching an old family video of him as a boy. Leah giggled, pointing at the screen. "Look, Daddy, you had chubby cheeks." He laughed, scooping her into his arms. "Careful, or I'll tickle you." The house, once cold and silent, now rang with laughter. Servants whispered to each other, amazed at the transformation. The stern billionaire who once barked orders now knelt on the floor to braid a little girl's hair. Still, there were shadows. Some nights Leah woke crying from nightmares, memories of the orphanage, of Agnes's harsh words, of the rain-soaked evening she had been left behind. Jabari would rush to her room, hold her close, and whisper, "It's over. You're safe. I'm here." Gradually, the nightmares faded. In their place came dreams, dreams of birthdays with balloons, school plays with a proud father in the front row, family dinners filled with warmth. When Leah's school announced a cultural day event, she was chosen to give the closing speech. She panicked, afraid her classmates would mock her again. But Jabari knelt in front of her, holding her hands. "Princess, you are stronger than you think. Speak with your heart. I'll be right there cheering louder than anyone." And he was. The day of the event, Jabari arrived in the front row with Madame Ya. When Leah stood on stage, her voice trembled at first. But then she saw him, her father eyes shining with pride. Confidence bloomed. "My name is Leah Aladi," she declared firmly. "I used to believe I had to lie to belong. But I've learned the truth. Family is not about lies or money. Family is about love, about who stands beside you when the rain falls. And I have a father who loves me, and I'm proud to be his daughter." The hall erupted in applause. Jabari's hands stung from clapping, but his heart soared higher than any success he had ever known. That night, after tucking Leah into bed, he lingered at her door. Ya joined him, her hand resting on his arm. "You've changed, Jabari," she said softly. He smiled faintly. "No, Mama. I've finally become who I was meant to be." He turned back to look at his sleeping daughter, her face peaceful, her tiny hand curled around the stuffed bunny he'd bought her. And in that moment, Jabari knew that every battle against gossip, against greedy relatives, against his own fear was worth it. Because Leah was not just his responsibility. She was his redemption. And their story, once built on a lie of a rented father, had transformed into a truth stronger than any bond money could buy. The weeks that followed the Cultural Day event unfolded like a new chapter in Leah's life, brighter than anything she had dared to imagine. The applause she received on stage still echoed in her ears, but more than that, the memory of Jabari rising to his feet, clapping with tears in his eyes, became the moment she carried like a secret crown. For once, she wasn't the girl mocked as an orphan. She was Leah Alade, daughter of the man everyone respected, and she finally believed it. Yet the world outside wasn't entirely ready to accept the truth so easily. The rumors didn't stop, they only twisted. Vanessa's campaign against Jabari continued. "He's distracted," she hissed during board meetings. "He's losing focus on the company. His heart is wrapped around a little girl." But Jabari didn't flinch. His answer was calm but carried thunder. "If protecting my daughter is considered weakness, then perhaps you've misunderstood strength." The boardroom fell silent. For the first time, his colleagues saw him not just as a tycoon, but as a father, a man fighting for something greater than profit margins. The real confrontation, however, came with Jonah. One humid afternoon, he returned to the mansion, this time alone. His shoulders slumped, his eyes bloodshot. Jabari's guards moved to block him, but he raised his hands. "Please, I just want to speak to him." Inside, Jabari listened, with arms folded, every muscle tense. Leah stood in the doorway behind her grandmother, clutching her bunny. "I was wrong," Jonah admitted, his voice breaking. "I failed her. I failed my sister's memory. I let Agnes poison me with greed. But I see now, you are the father she needed all along. Please, forgive me." Jabari's jaw clenched. He remembered the night Leah had been left in the rain, abandoned by this very man. Forgiveness wasn't easy. But then he looked at his daughter. Her eyes weren't filled with hatred, they were filled with hope. "Uncle," she whispered softly, stepping forward. "If you're sorry, then don't hurt me again. Just let me be happy here." Jonah's lips trembled. He dropped to his knees. "I swear it, Leah. I'll never fail you again." The room was quiet. Finally, Jabari exhaled. "Stand up, Jonah. If you truly regret, then prove it. Support her from afar. Don't drag her down. If you want redemption, start there." Jonah nodded, tears streaming down his face. For the first time in years, perhaps he understood what family truly meant. A week later, Jabari went to court. The judge presiding over family matters was stern, but when presented with Leah's abandonment records, the DNA test, and Jonah's formal statement relinquishing guardianship, the decision was clear. "Custody is hereby granted to Mr. Jabari Alade," the judge declared. "Henceforth, the child shall bear his name as her legal guardian and father." Leah sat in the back, swinging her legs nervously. When the gavel struck, Jabari leaned down and whispered, "You're officially my daughter now, forever." Her smile was so radiant it nearly blinded him. She threw her arms around his neck and whispered, "I told you the best lie I ever told became the best truth." But Jabari didn't stop there. In honor of Naima and in recognition of the many children who shared Leah's fate, he founded the Naima Foundation, a scholarship and library initiative for children from poor neighborhoods. On the day of the launch, Leah stood beside him in a pink dress, clutching his hand as reporters snapped photos. He spoke to the crowd with sincerity that surprised even himself. "We measure wealth by numbers and assets. But true wealth," he paused, glancing at Leah, "is measured by the lives we touch, the children we protect, and the legacies we leave behind." The audience erupted in applause. For the first time, Jabari wasn't just a billionaire on a pedestal. He was a father, a man using his power for something greater. At school, the change was dramatic. Ruby, once the loudest mocker, approached Leah hesitantly one afternoon. Her eyes darted nervously. I'm sorry. For all the things I said, I didn't know." Leah tilted her head. "You didn't know what, that I was worth kindness even if I didn't have a dad." Ruby swallowed hard. "You're right. I was wrong. Can we be friends?" Leah considered it for a long moment. Then she smiled faintly. "If you help me in the library project Daddy's starting, then maybe." Ruby laughed nervously. "Deal?" From that day, the two girls began working together on a weekend program where students read stories aloud to children from poorer neighborhoods. Slowly, the wound of ridicule turned into the seed of friendship. At home, life brimmed with warmth. Yah filled the evenings with proverbs and laughter. Leah decorated her room with drawings of castles and families, and Jabari found himself looking forward to simple things. He once ignored family dinners, bedtime stories, even helping Leah with her school projects. One night, as he tucked her in, Leah asked quietly, "Daddy, will you ever leave me?" The question pierced him like a blade. He knelt by her bed, took her tiny hand, and said, "Never. Not even in death. If one day I can't be here, my love will still stay. You are my heartbeat, Leah." She blinked back tears and whispered, "Then I'm not afraid anymore." The day of her 9th birthday became the turning point. The mansion was transformed into a sea of pink balloons, pink cake, pink chin-chin. Even the driver wore a pink cap. Leah invited her entire class, including Ruby, and when she blew out the candles, she closed her eyes and made a wish. "Let this family stay forever." Later that evening, after the guests left and the music faded, Jabari carried her upstairs. He tucked her in, brushed the hair from her forehead, and whispered, "Good night, my princess. I love you more than the whole world." Half asleep, Leah smiled. "I love you too, my real daddy." In that quiet moment, Jabari realized the journey had come full circle. What began as a desperate lie, a rented father for 3 days, had become the truth that would define the rest of their lives. The girl who had offered him crumpled notes in exchange for pretend love was now the treasure he would never trade for anything. And the man who once thought himself too powerful to be touched by emotion had discovered that the greatest empire he would ever build was not of glass towers but of love, laughter, and the family he thought he'd lost forever. The morning after the birthday celebration, the Alade mansion still shimmered with the echoes of laughter. Balloons floated lazily against the high ceiling, pink ribbons trailed across the marble floors, and the faint scent of frosting lingered in the air. Leah padded barefoot down the corridor, her bunny in one hand, her eyes still glowing from the magic of the night before. When she reached the dining room, Jabari was already there sipping coffee, reading the morning papers. For once, his suit jacket was draped over the chair instead of across his shoulders. He looked up, caught sight of his daughter, and smiled the kind of smile that softened his entire face. "Morning, princess," he said. "Morning, daddy." She climbed onto his lap without asking, curling against him like she had always belonged there. "You know," he whispered conspiratorially, "yesterday was just the beginning. From now on, every year we'll celebrate bigger, brighter." Her eyes widened. "Bigger than pink popcorn. Bigger than pink popcorn," he assured her. But life has always carried its shadows. Though Jonah had walked away in shame, whispers in the community still reached Leah's ears. At school, some children, egged on by jealous parents, muttered that she was lucky to trick a billionaire, that she was just a poor girl who had stumbled into fortune. Leah tried to brush it off, but the words lodged deep, sharp as thorns. One afternoon, she came home unusually quiet. Jabari noticed immediately. "What happened at school?" he asked gently. She hesitated, then whispered, "They said I don't belong here, that I'm just pretending." Jabari felt his chest tighten. He pulled her close, his hand resting protectively on her hair. "Listen to me, Leah. You are mine. Not because of luck, not because of pretense, but because you are my daughter. Nothing anyone says can change that. She looked up, her eyes shimmering. Even if mommy's not here, even then, he said firmly, your mommy gave me the greatest gift, and now together we'll honor her by living bravely with love. Leah's lips curved into a small smile. Then I'll be brave, Daddy. The next weeks were filled with healing. Jabari introduced Leah formally at a charity gala, standing on the stage with her tiny hand in his. Cameras flashed, reporters gasped. This is my daughter, he declared, his voice steady, proud. From today, the world will know her name, not as an orphan, not as a rumor, but as Leah Alaid, my princess. The room erupted with applause. Leah beamed, standing taller than she ever had. For the first time, the world wasn't laughing at her, it was cheering. At home, Madame Ya continued weaving family into every corner of their lives. She taught Leah to cook jollof rice, though the kitchen ended up covered in red sauce. She showed her how to tie headscarves, though Leah preferred twirling them like ribbons. The house echoed with music, stories, and laughter. Even the staff, once stiff and formal, now joined in the warmth. One rainy evening, Leah sat with Jabari and his study crayons spread across the desk. She was drawing a picture, 3 figures holding hands, a man in a suit, a little girl with braids, and an older woman with a wide smile. This is us, she announced proudly. Jabari stared at the drawing, his throat tight. It's beautiful. Do you like it? I love it, he said, his voice cracking. He pinned it to the wall behind his desk above all the contracts and awards. It became his most prized possession. The transformation in Jabari was impossible to miss. The man once known for icy detachment and ruthless ambition was now the father who left board meetings early to pick up his daughter from school, who attended school plays with flowers in hand, who sat cross-legged on the floor, building Lego castles. One evening, his driver whispered to a guard, Olga has changed, oh. That small girl, they do miracle. And indeed she had. But the true test came one Sunday morning when Jabari gathered the household. Leah sat perched on his lap, Ya by his side. He looked around at the faces that had witnessed his journey and cleared his throat. Family, he began, is not built on money or blood alone. It is built on love, on who we choose to protect, on the promises we refuse to break. For too long, I lived only for myself. But this little girl, he kissed Leah's forehead, taught me that the greatest empire is not a company. It is a home. Ya's eyes glistened with pride. Leah squeezed his hand, whispering, I love you, Daddy. And Jabari, for the first time in public, let his tears fall freely. I love you more, my princess. Months later, the Naima Foundation Library project opened in one of the poorest neighborhoods. Leah cut the ribbon with scissors, almost too big for her hands, beaming, as children rushed inside to grab books. She turned to Jabari and whispered, Mommy would be proud, right? He knelt, looking into her eyes. Yes, princess, she would be more than proud, and so am I. Together they stepped into the library, surrounded by children's laughter and the scent of new beginnings. That night, back at the mansion, after the lights dimmed and the world quieted, Jabari tucked Leah into bed. She reached for his hand, her eyes heavy with sleep. Daddy. Yes, princess. Promise me something. Anything. Promise you'll always stay, even when I grow old. Jabari smiled through tears, brushing her hair from her forehead. I promise, even when you're 50 and still, my princess, I'll be here. She giggled softly, then drifted into sleep, her hands still clutching his. Jabari sat beside her for a long time, watching the steady rise and fall of her chest. He thought of Naima, of the crumpled notes Leah once offered him, of the rain-soaked night that had changed everything. And he knew without a doubt that this was his greatest victory. Not the towers he had built, not the deals he had sealed, but this being the father his daughter deserved. The story that began as a lie, a desperate plea from a little girl to rent a father for 3 days, had transformed into a truth no storm could shake. Leah had not only found her real dad, she had given him back his humanity, his joy, his reason to live. And as the moon cast silver light across the Alaid mansion, a whisper seemed to float through the night air, as though Naima herself was watching. Thank you for keeping her safe. Thank you for finally coming home. For Jabari and Leah, this was not the end. It was the beginning of forever. Life often teaches us that family is not always about where we start, but about who chooses to stay. Leah's story reminds us that love can rise from lies, pain can give birth to healing, and even the richest man is poor until he finds the ones he would die to protect. We all crave belonging, not in wealth or applause, but in arms that refuse to let go. If you've ever felt abandoned, remember life can surprise you with the family you least expect. Cherish those who stand by you when the rain falls, because that is true wealth. What do you think of Leah and Jabari's journey? Share your thoughts in the comments, and if their story touched you, don't forget to subscribe so you never miss another tale of love, loss, and redemption.